I am here to expose this person close to your soulmate. They are having a sinful affair with my beloved child. I am here to expose someone dangerously close to your soulmate, because what has been happening behind closed doors is no longer something that can remain hidden. For weeks, this person has been smiling in your soulmate's face, listening to private conversations, pretending to be loyal, and acting as though they would never cross a certain line. But recently, one small mistake exposed a completely different side of them. A message appeared at the wrong moment. A name flashed across a screen that should never have been there. And when your soulmate noticed the sudden panic in this person's eyes, something immediately felt wrong. They tried to laugh it away. They changed the subject. But your soulmate remembered that name, because it belonged to someone connected to a situation that had already caused tension before. What your soulmate doesn't fully understand yet is that the secret is much deeper than a few suspicious messages. Someone close to them has been maintaining a forbidden emotional affair in complete secrecy, and the identity of the other person could change the way your soulmate sees several people around them. The strangest part is how carefully this secret was protected. Meetings were disguised as ordinary errands. Conversations disappeared from phones. Excuses were prepared before questions were even asked. Yet secrets become harder to control when two people begin making different promises to different people, and that is exactly what happened here. One of them believed this hidden relationship would eventually become something real, while the other apparently wanted it to remain buried forever. That difference created pressure. Then came the argument your soulmate accidentally overheard. They couldn't hear every word, but one sentence cut through everything else. You said they would never find out. Your soulmate stopped walking. The voices immediately dropped. A door closed. Minutes later, the person closest to your soulmate emerged looking unusually calm, almost too calm. Don't skip, because what happened afterward gave your soulmate the first piece of evidence they could no longer explain away. That person claimed they had been speaking with someone completely different, but your soulmate had already recognized the second voice. And this is where the story becomes far more personal. Your soulmate didn't confront them immediately. Instead, they quietly started remembering things that once seemed meaningless. Unexplained absences, sudden changes in behavior, private jokes between two people who supposedly barely knew each other, and one uncomfortable moment when your soulmate entered a room and the conversation instantly stopped. Piece by piece, an ugly pattern began forming. But there was still one question your soulmate couldn't answer. Why would someone they trusted risk so much for this secret connection? Then, just hours ago, something unexpected arrived. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't even meant for your soulmate. It was a message forwarded by mistake, containing only a few words and a meeting place, but those words revealed that another secret encounter had already been arranged. Your soulmate now knows where this person intends to go, and they are considering showing up without warning. But there is one detail they haven't noticed yet. The person waiting at that meeting place is someone your soulmate would never expect to be involved. Your soulmate had barely finished reading that accidental message when another detail caught their attention, a time stamp that proved this meeting had been planned long before the suspicious conversation they overheard. That changed everything. This wasn't a sudden mistake or an impulsive decision. Someone had been carefully arranging these encounters while continuing to behave normally around your soulmate. Instead of confronting anyone, your soulmate quietly memorized the location and waited. But before the meeting time arrived, the person close to them suddenly announced they needed to leave for an ordinary reason, delivering the excuse so naturally that it might have worked on any other day. Your soulmate simply nodded and watched them walk away. Then something unexpected happened. Less than 5 minutes later, another familiar person sent your soulmate a casual message asking where they were. The timing felt strange. Why would that person suddenly need to know your soulmate's location? Your soulmate gave a vague answer, and almost immediately, the message was marked as read. No reply followed. That silence was enough to make one possibility impossible to ignore. Somebody might be checking whether the path to that secret meeting was clear. Your soulmate decided not to rush into anything. They wanted certainty, because accusing someone without proof could destroy relationships that might never recover. So they followed the clues instead, keeping enough distance to remain unnoticed. When they reached the area mentioned in the message, they expected to see the person close to them waiting alone. They weren't. A second figure was already there, standing partly out of sight, and even from a distance your soulmate recognized something familiar about the way that person moved. Then the two stepped closer and began talking with the unmistakable tension of people carrying a secret too heavy to hold comfortably. There was no innocent friendliness in their expressions. One looked nervous. The other looked frustrated. Your soulmate couldn't hear everything, but fragments reached them. We agreed, this has gone too far, and finally, you cannot tell them now. Stay till the end, because your soulmate suddenly understood something disturbing. This hidden affair wasn't only being concealed from them. Someone involved was terrified that another person would discover it too. Then the second figure turned slightly, and your soulmate finally saw enough of their face to recognize them. Their heart dropped, not because this was a stranger, but because this person had been welcomed into their life before. Someone who had sat nearby, exchanged friendly words, and behaved as though there was absolutely nothing to hide. Suddenly every awkward silence and unexplained glance carried a different meaning. Your soulmate reached for their phone, unsure whether to document what they were witnessing or step forward and demand answers. But before they could decide, the conversation changed. The person closest to your soulmate pulled an envelope from their pocket and handed it over. The other person stared at it and whispered something that made the entire situation feel even bigger. If they see what's inside this, they'll know why we started meeting in the first place. Your soulmate froze. Because this meant the affair itself might not be the original secret at all, and whatever was inside that envelope could expose who truly brought these two people together. Your soulmate stayed completely still as the envelope changed hands, realizing they had just uncovered a second mystery hiding beneath the affair. The person holding it didn't open it immediately. Instead, they looked around nervously and asked one question your soulmate could barely make out: does anyone else know about this? The person close to your soulmate shook their head, but their hesitation said something different. Then came a revelation your soulmate wasn't prepared for. The second person mentioned your soulmate by name and said they had already started noticing things. Suddenly, this wasn't simply about keeping an affair hidden. These two had been discussing your soulmate's suspicions before your soulmate even knew there was something to suspect. Someone had been watching their reactions, measuring what they knew, and reporting it back. And then the person closest to your soulmate said something chillingly simple: "They trust me. That's why we still have time." In that instant, your soulmate understood how deeply that trust had been used against them. But the secret meeting didn't unfold the way either person expected. The one holding the envelope suddenly refused to leave with it. Their voice became sharper, and for the first time, your soulmate could hear almost every word. "I'm tired of hiding this. You promised everything would be different by now." There it was, the emotional truth beneath all those secret meetings. One person wanted the hidden relationship brought into the open, while the other desperately wanted to protect the life they already had. Your soulmate watched the person close to them step backward, visibly shaken, before saying, "You knew what this was from the beginning." That sentence caused an immediate silence. Something huge was waiting beneath it. Because the other person responded with a detail that changed the timeline completely. Their connection had apparently begun before your soulmate ever noticed the first suspicious behavior. Much earlier. And there had been one particular night when everything crossed a boundary that could no longer be explained as friendship. Your soulmate suddenly remembered that night. The strange excuse. The unanswered calls. The unusually distant behavior afterward. At the time, none of it seemed connected, but now every piece was sliding into place. They wanted to step forward immediately, yet something stopped them. The second person finally opened the envelope, pulled out a folded document, and stared at it in disbelief. Whatever they expected to find, this wasn't it. Their expression changed from anger to shock. "Where did you get this?" they demanded. The person close to your soulmate glanced away and answered quietly, "From someone who knows what really happened that night." Now even the person involved in the affair appeared confused. That meant there was a third person behind this secret, someone who knew about the relationship, knew about that mysterious night, and had deliberately provided evidence. Then your soulmate saw a name printed across the top of the document. They recognized it instantly. And suddenly, they understood why this affair had been kept so carefully hidden. Exposing these two could also expose someone even closer to your soulmate than either of them. The name on that document belonged to someone your soulmate had trusted for years, someone whose connection to this entire situation should have been impossible. For several seconds, your soulmate wondered whether they had read it correctly. Then the person holding the paper whispered the same name aloud, confirming everything. Their face went pale. "They told me they knew nothing about us," they said. The person close to your soulmate gave a bitter laugh and answered, "That's what they wanted you to believe." Suddenly, the hidden affair had another layer. Someone had known about these secret meetings almost from the beginning, yet instead of exposing them, they had quietly allowed them to continue. Why? Your soulmate leaned closer, desperate to understand without being seen. Then came another clue. The document wasn't proof of the affair itself. It contained dates, locations, and records connected to that mysterious night your soulmate had just remembered. And one date was circled twice, the exact night everything between these people apparently changed. The second person stared at that circled date before asking, "So this was planned?" The question landed heavily. Until now, your soulmate had assumed the affair developed privately between two people who made terrible choices. But the conversation suggested someone else had deliberately pushed them together. The person close to your soulmate admitted that before the affair began, they had received anonymous messages encouraging them to meet this person alone. At first, they ignored them. Then those messages began revealing private details that only someone within your soulmate's trusted circle could have known. Don't skip, because the next revelation changed your soulmate's understanding completely. The second person admitted receiving similar messages. Different wording. Same instructions. Someone had been quietly creating opportunities for these two to spend time together while making sure your soulmate remained unaware. The affair was still their choice, but another person had clearly been manipulating the circumstances from the shadows. And whoever did it seemed to have a reason for wanting your soulmate's closest relationships fractured. Your soulmate's first instinct was to reveal themselves and demand the entire truth, but then the second person unfolded another page from the envelope. A handwritten note slipped onto the ground. Neither of them noticed it immediately, but your soulmate could see several words from where they stood. When the truth comes out, they will blame each other. That sentence made everything suddenly feel calculated. The person close to your soulmate finally noticed the note, picked it up, and froze. They recognized the handwriting. Your soulmate saw recognition cross their face before they quickly tried to hide it, but the other person noticed too. "You know who wrote that?" they said. No answer came. Instead, the person close to your soulmate folded the note and whispered, "We need to leave. Right now." But they were already too late. A phone began ringing nearby, not theirs, and not your soulmate's. Both people turned toward the sound as a third figure stepped from behind a parked vehicle. Your soulmate couldn't see the face yet, but the person close to them could, and the fear in their expression revealed that the architect of this entire secret had just arrived. The third figure didn't rush toward them. They simply stood there, calm enough to make the moment even more unsettling, while the two people involved in the affair stared as though the secret they had protected for months had suddenly taken human form. Your soulmate remained hidden, watching the person close to them grip that handwritten note tighter. Then the newcomer spoke, "I told you not to bring those papers here." That single sentence confirmed something enormous. This person knew about the envelope. They knew about the secret meetings. And apparently, they had been giving instructions long before tonight. The second person immediately demanded an explanation, but the newcomer ignored them and looked directly at the person close to your soulmate. "Did you tell them why this really started?" Silence followed. Your soulmate felt their heartbeat quicken. There it was again, the suggestion that the affair had begun under circumstances neither person fully understood. But what happened next was even stranger. The newcomer claimed they had never intended for the relationship to become romantic at all. According to them, the original plan had been much simpler: bring these two people together long enough to uncover information one of them possessed. But somewhere along the way, private conversations became emotional dependence, and emotional dependence crossed a boundary. The newcomer insisted that everything after that had been their own decision. The person involved in the affair became furious. "So you used both of us?" they asked. The newcomer didn't deny it. Instead, they revealed why your soulmate had unknowingly been at the center of the entire scheme. Months earlier, your soulmate had apparently come dangerously close to discovering an old family secret, something buried so deeply that several people had quietly agreed it should never surface. Creating distraction and distrust around your soulmate had been useful. If your soulmate became focused on relationship problems, strange behavior, and conflicting stories, they might stop asking questions about the past. But whoever designed that plan had underestimated one thing: the two people they pushed together developed real feelings, and those feelings made the secret impossible to control. Then the person close to your soulmate finally snapped. They stepped toward the newcomer and said, "You promised nobody would get hurt." The newcomer answered with 4 words: "That promise was impossible." Your soulmate felt the meaning of those words immediately. This wasn't only about betrayal anymore. Someone had deliberately manipulated people around them, and the affair had become the unintended consequence. But before your soulmate could process it, the second person held up the document and demanded to know what happened on the circled night. The newcomer's confidence disappeared. For the first time, they looked genuinely afraid. They tried to take the paper, but the other person pulled it away and read one line aloud, a line your soulmate couldn't fully hear. Whatever it said caused the person close to your soulmate to whisper, "That can't be true." Then the newcomer looked toward the exact place where your soulmate was hiding and said quietly, "There's something else you both need to know." Your soulmate was never supposed to find out who was actually there that night. For one terrifying second, your soulmate wondered whether the newcomer had spotted them. But the figure turned back toward the others and continued speaking, unaware that the very person they had worked so hard to deceive was hearing everything. The circled night, they explained, was when the entire chain of secrets began. The person close to your soulmate had believed they were meeting the other person by coincidence, but someone else had arranged for both of them to arrive at the same place. And they weren't alone. A 4th person had been there before either of them arrived, someone who had quietly witnessed their first private conversation and later used it as leverage. Your soulmate immediately remembered an unusual detail from that night. Someone they trusted had called unexpectedly, asking exactly where they were and how long they planned to stay there. At the time, it sounded like harmless curiosity. Now it sounded like someone making sure your soulmate remained far away. The second person demanded the 4th person's identity, but the newcomer refused. "If I tell you, everything changes," they warned. That answer only made the tension worse. The person close to your soulmate stepped forward and accused the newcomer of protecting whoever had orchestrated the deception. This time, there was no denial. Instead, the newcomer revealed that the 4th person possessed something far more damaging than messages or photographs, an old recording connected to the family secret your soulmate had nearly uncovered months earlier. That recording was why everyone had been manipulated into silence. Stay till the end, because your soulmate suddenly realized the affair had become useful to whoever possessed it. As long as everyone feared exposure, they could be controlled. The two people involved had made their own choices, but someone had taken those choices and turned them into pressure. Then the newcomer said something nobody expected: "The person controlling this isn't protecting themselves. They're protecting someone your soulmate loves." That sentence shattered every assumption your soulmate had made. They had expected selfishness, betrayal, perhaps even jealousy, but not protection. Who could possibly be important enough to justify months of lies? The person holding the envelope apparently wondered the same thing, because they immediately demanded a name. After several seconds, the newcomer finally reached into their coat and removed a small photograph. They handed it over without speaking. The person close to your soulmate looked at it first, and every trace of anger disappeared from their face. Their hands began trembling. Then the photograph passed to the other person, whose expression changed just as quickly. Your soulmate couldn't see the image from their hiding place, but they heard the whispered reaction: "Your soulmate thinks this person disappeared from their life years ago." The newcomer nodded. That's what everyone needed them to believe. And just before your soulmate stepped forward, the photograph slipped from their hands and landed face up on the pavement, revealing a face your soulmate never expected to see again. The face in that photograph pulled your soulmate straight into a memory they had spent years trying to understand. This was someone once woven deeply into their life, someone whose sudden disappearance had never been properly explained. Your soulmate had been given simple answers back then. Circumstances changed, people moved on, some doors simply closed. But now an old photograph was lying beside evidence of a secret affair, and those explanations no longer made sense. The person close to your soulmate stared at the newcomer and whispered, "You told me they were gone." The newcomer answered carefully, "I told you what I was told to say." That distinction changed everything. Your soulmate suddenly understood that the lies surrounding this affair hadn't begun weeks or months ago. They stretched much further into the past. And whoever appeared in that photograph might be the reason someone had spent so much time controlling what your soulmate was allowed to discover. Then the second person asked the question your soulmate desperately wanted answered: "What does this person have to do with us?" The newcomer hesitated before revealing that the person in the photograph had discovered the old recording first. They had intended to bring it directly to your soulmate, believing the truth had been hidden long enough. But before that could happen, someone convinced them that revealing everything would destroy more than one relationship. So they disappeared from your soulmate's world voluntarily, or at least, that was the version the newcomer had been given. Now even that story seemed questionable. Because 3 weeks ago, the person in the photograph had resurfaced and contacted someone inside your soulmate's trusted circle. They wanted to finally speak. They wanted the secrecy finished. And most importantly, they specifically asked about your soulmate. The person close to your soulmate immediately demanded to know who received that message. The newcomer looked away, and that tiny reaction gave away more than any confession could. Your soulmate could no longer remain hidden. Every answer had produced a larger question, and now someone from their past was apparently trying to reach them while people in the present were actively preventing it. But just as your soulmate prepared to step forward, the phone belonging to the person close to them vibrated. Everyone froze. A new message had arrived from an unknown number, containing a photograph taken only moments earlier. It showed the secret meeting from across the street. The envelope, the newcomer, and both people involved in the affair. Someone else was watching them. Beneath the image were 7 words: "You were warned not to involve your soulmate." The newcomer immediately scanned the surrounding buildings, suddenly frightened. But your soulmate noticed something none of them did. In the corner of the photograph was a reflection in a storefront window, faint but unmistakable. It revealed the silhouette of whoever had taken the picture. And your soulmate recognized that silhouette, because they had seen that same person earlier that very day. Your soulmate's mind raced backward through the day, searching for the exact moment that familiar silhouette had appeared. Then they remembered. Earlier, someone had stopped by unexpectedly, behaving almost too casually while asking questions about your soulmate's plans for the evening. At the time, it felt harmless. Now the reason was painfully clear. That person hadn't been making conversation. They had been checking whether your soulmate might interfere with tonight's secret meeting. Even worse, they had smiled while doing it. Your soulmate looked again at the reflection captured in the photograph and recognized the same jacket, the same posture, even the distinctive way the person held their phone. This was no stranger hiding in the shadows. It was someone who had been welcomed close enough to know your soulmate's routines. Someone who could ask personal questions without raising suspicion. And suddenly, the newcomer's earlier warning made perfect sense. Whoever had been controlling these secrets wasn't far away. They had been moving through your soulmate's everyday life. The person close to your soulmate began typing a response to the unknown number, but another message arrived before they could finish. Leave the envelope and walk away. The second person immediately refused. They held the documents tighter and demanded that the newcomer explain who was sending these messages. This time, the newcomer finally stopped protecting the truth. They admitted that only one person had access to the photographs, the old recording, and enough private information to manipulate everyone involved. But before they could say the name, your soulmate heard footsteps somewhere behind them. Slow. Deliberate. Getting closer. The newcomer heard them too and suddenly whispered, "They're here. Don't skip." Because the person involved in the affair did something completely unexpected. Instead of running, they pulled one page from the envelope and held it toward the approaching figure. "I know what you've been hiding," they called out. The footsteps stopped. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then a familiar voice answered from the darkness, "No. You only know the version I wanted you to find." That voice confirmed your soulmate's suspicion instantly. It belonged to the person who had visited earlier that day. But the deeper shock came when they stepped into view and looked directly toward your soulmate's hiding place. "You can come out now," they said calmly. Every person at the meeting turned in disbelief. Your soulmate's stomach dropped. They had known all along. There was no reason to hide anymore, so your soulmate stepped forward, forcing everyone to finally face the person they had been discussing in secret. The person close to your soulmate couldn't even meet their eyes. The other participant in the affair looked terrified. But the watcher remained strangely composed. Your soulmate asked only one question, "Why?" The answer came without hesitation. "Because the affair was never the secret I was afraid you'd discover." Then they pointed toward the photograph lying on the pavement and added, "Look at the back." Your soulmate picked it up, turned it over, and found a handwritten date followed by two names. One belonged to the person from their past. The second name belonged to someone currently standing at that meeting, and suddenly, your soulmate realized those two people shared a connection nobody had ever told them about. Your soulmate stared at those two names until the noise around them seemed to disappear. The connection was written in only a few words beneath the date, but it rewrote years of assumptions. The person from your soulmate's past and someone standing at that meeting had known each other long before anyone admitted. Not casually. They had worked together to uncover the very secret everyone was now protecting. Your soulmate looked up and immediately noticed who couldn't hold their gaze, the newcomer. Finally, the newcomer admitted they had met the person in the photograph years earlier, after discovering that certain stories your soulmate had been told simply didn't match the records. Together, they began asking questions. But when they got too close to the truth, pressure came from inside the trusted circle. One person disappeared from your soulmate's life. The other stayed behind and pretended nothing had happened. And now your soulmate understood why the newcomer had looked terrified from the moment they arrived. They weren't only carrying information. They had been carrying guilt. Then your soulmate turned toward the person closest to them. "And the affair?" they asked. Nobody answered immediately. The silence itself felt like an admission. Eventually, the other person involved spoke first. They confessed that the relationship began during those deliberately arranged meetings, when both of them believed they were privately searching for answers. Shared fear became trust. Trust became emotional attachment. And eventually, they crossed a line they knew should never have been crossed. There was no excuse offered. No attempt to make betrayal sound innocent. But one detail remained strange: both had received anonymous instructions directing them toward the same clues. Someone wanted them investigating together, while simultaneously collecting evidence of their secret relationship. Your soulmate finally saw the trap. Whoever orchestrated this had created the perfect form of control. Give two people enough truth to keep them curious, let their hidden relationship become compromising, then use that relationship to silence them whenever they got too close. But the watcher who had summoned your soulmate from hiding suddenly interrupted. "You're still missing the most important piece." They took the photograph, pointed to the handwritten date, and explained that it wasn't the date the picture had been taken. It was the date the old recording had been made. Your soulmate felt another memory surface: a family gathering, a closed room, an argument adults insisted had never happened. The person from their past had apparently recorded part of that conversation without realizing what it would eventually prove. Something huge was waiting inside those few minutes of audio, something powerful enough to keep multiple people lying for years. Your soulmate demanded to hear it. The watcher hesitated, then unlocked their phone and opened an audio file. Before pressing play, they gave one warning: once you hear this, you'll understand why that person disappeared, and why someone standing here was willing to risk everything to keep you from finding them. Then the recording began, and the first voice your soulmate heard belonged to the last person they ever expected. The first voice on the recording belonged to the very person your soulmate had always believed was protecting them from the painful confusion of the past. It was unmistakable. Older in the recording, quieter than your soulmate remembered, but unmistakable. Everyone at the meeting went silent as the voice said, "If they learn who arranged this, they'll never trust any of us again." Your soulmate felt those words settle heavily. Then another voice answered from farther away, warning that the person in the photograph was already asking too many questions. That was when the recording suddenly became personal. Your soulmate's name was mentioned. Not casually. They were discussing exactly what your soulmate should be told, which details should be changed, and which person should be removed from their life before questions became impossible to answer. The watcher paused the audio. Your soulmate demanded they continue. But the person close to your soulmate finally stepped forward and whispered, "Before you hear the rest, there's something I need to admit." For the first time that night, the hidden affair stopped being the only confession hanging between them. The person closest to your soulmate admitted they had heard part of this recording weeks earlier. That was why their behavior had changed. That was why they had started meeting secretly with the other person. At first, those meetings really had been about uncovering the truth. But fear, secrecy, and emotional dependence blurred boundaries until they made choices they deeply regretted. Your soulmate listened without interrupting. Then came the detail nobody expected. The person involved in the affair had recognized one of the voices on the recording immediately. They knew exactly who it belonged to, but they had refused to reveal the identity because doing so would expose their own connection to that person. Suddenly, the sinful affair and the old family secret were no longer separate stories. They intersected through one individual who had been influencing both sides from the beginning. The watcher pressed play again. A third voice entered the old recording, sharper and more confident than the others. "Keep them apart," it said. "If those two ever compare what they know, everything comes out." Your soulmate's eyes moved instinctively toward the person involved in the affair. Their face had gone pale. They recognized that voice too. Then the recording captured a name. Partially muffled, but clear enough to make the newcomer step backward in disbelief. Your soulmate demanded the full identity, and this time nobody could pretend ignorance. The person involved in the affair slowly reached into their pocket and removed another phone, one they had kept hidden throughout the meeting. On its screen was a recent conversation with the owner of that third voice. The latest message had arrived only 20 minutes earlier: "Do not let your soulmate hear the recording." Your soulmate looked at the contact name above it and froze. Because the person sending those instructions wasn't someone from the distant past. They were someone your soulmate had spoken to within the last 24 hours. Your soulmate recognized the contact name immediately, and suddenly one conversation from the previous day sounded completely different. This person had called for no urgent reason, asking harmless questions about where your soulmate had been spending time, whether anything unusual had happened, and whether anyone had recently contacted them from the past. At the time, it sounded like concern. Now your soulmate understood it as information gathering. The person involved in the affair finally admitted that the same individual had been contacting them for weeks, sometimes offering clues and sometimes warning them to stop searching. That contradiction had kept everyone confused. Why help them approach the truth and then frighten them away from it? The watcher answered quietly, "Because they needed to know how much you had discovered." Every anonymous clue had been bait. Every warning had been a test. And the secret affair had given this person exactly what they needed, a reason to keep both participants frightened, divided, and easy to pressure. But your soulmate still wanted the answer nobody seemed willing to give. Who were they trying to protect? The question silenced everyone again. The newcomer finally pointed toward the old recording and explained that the third voice wasn't protecting the person from the photograph. They were protecting someone who had been present during that long-ago argument but never spoke loudly enough to be clearly captured. Someone whose involvement had remained invisible because everyone focused on the recognizable voices. Your soulmate demanded the recording be played from the beginning again. This time, they listened differently, not to the argument, but to everything underneath it. A chair moved. Someone whispered. Then, just before the loudest exchange, a quiet voice said a sentence your soulmate had heard countless times growing up. A familiar phrase. A distinctive way of speaking. Your soulmate's expression changed instantly. They knew who it was. And judging by the faces around them, several other people had recognized it too. The person close to your soulmate finally broke down and admitted this was the discovery they had been trying to delay. They feared that once your soulmate recognized that hidden voice, every relationship connected to the past would be questioned. But your soulmate wasn't interested in another excuse. They wanted the complete recording. The watcher moved the audio forward several seconds, and the quiet voice returned, this time clearly enough to reveal one crucial statement. The person in the photograph had been told to leave your soulmate's life because they possessed something that could prove the official story was false. Then another voice asked, and if they come back? The answer was immediate, make sure they speak to me before they ever reach your soulmate. The recording stopped. Nobody moved. Because the person who said those words was the same person who had contacted the secret lover only 20 minutes earlier. And then, as if the timing had been planned, your soulmate's own phone began ringing. The caller's name was exactly the same one glowing on that hidden phone. Your soulmate stared at the ringing phone while everyone around them watched in silence. Nobody needed to explain what that call meant. The person who had spent weeks controlling information somehow knew this meeting had reached a dangerous point. Your soulmate answered but said nothing. For several seconds, there was only breathing on the other end. Then the familiar voice asked calmly, "Where are you right now?" Your soulmate looked directly at the person holding the hidden phone and replied, "Why does that matter?" The caller hesitated. Just long enough. Then they claimed they had heard something concerning and wanted to make sure your soulmate was safe. But your soulmate had finally learned how to hear the difference between concern and calculation. Instead of revealing what they knew, they asked one question: why did you make that person disappear from my life? The silence that followed was longer this time. And when the caller finally answered, their voice had completely changed. "Who gave you the recording?" That question was the confession nobody expected. The caller hadn't asked what recording. They already knew exactly what your soulmate meant. Everyone exchanged stunned looks as your soulmate quietly put the call on speaker. The watcher signaled for them to keep talking. Your soulmate asked why two people had been manipulated into meeting secretly and why their affair had later been used to keep them silent. The caller denied arranging the affair itself but admitted knowing about it almost immediately. "They made their own choices," the voice said. "I simply made sure those choices didn't destroy what I was protecting." The person close to your soulmate couldn't remain quiet anymore. "You used us," they said. The caller recognized the voice instantly. Another silence. Then came an answer that opened an entirely new question: "No. I used the secret you created." There's a difference. But what could possibly matter enough to justify years of deception, disappearing relationships, anonymous messages, and this elaborate web of control. Your soulmate demanded the truth about the person in the photograph. This time, the caller stopped pretending. They admitted that person had returned weeks ago and had been trying desperately to reach your soulmate. Several messages had been intercepted before they arrived. One meeting had even been cancelled through a false message sent in your soulmate's name. The revelation hit hard. Someone from the past hadn't abandoned your soulmate again, they had been deliberately kept away. Then your soulmate.